Hey guys, thank you very much for joining me today. You guys are rock stars. I appreciate the patience. In case you guys don't know, the reason why we do a little bit of, lag in the beginning, those 10 minutes, the countdown, is because it takes a bit for YouTube to decide which servers they're going to put the live stream on and then how many people are going to be notified. So that's kind of what that purpose is. Again, thank you all for your patience. We got a nice little crowd here today. So big shout out, Lewis. Thanks for hanging out, man. Jamie, good to see you. Extraordinary, thanks for stopping by. King Crux Gaming. And Max, always good to see you too, dude. Anthony, great to see you. I edit projects from the DMV. Are you really at the DMV? That's kind of funny. Thanks for stopping by, dude. And Loud and Clear, always good to see you. Vanity Shape. Awesome. Thanks, guys, all for showing up. So let me go through kind of what I'd like to try to do with this live stream today. So I'm going to go through maybe, comparing features between each of the two cameras. And after I go through that feature, then I'm going to go and read the comments in case there are any questions or in case anybody wants to jump into the live stream, which if you do, I'll post the link. You guys can join in. Angel Gomez, good to see you. Cam, dude, thanks for stopping by, dude. So yeah, we'll talk about a feature. If anybody wants to jump in or has a question, and I can try to answer it. And then we'll just keep going down the list of all the different features. And because this is a weekend wind down, I think, and I want to make it better every time, with my production and so on and so forth. I want to start weekend wind downs by talking very quickly about wine. And as you guys know, I like wine. So the wine that I'm talking about today is this one, the Guilty. It's an Australian wine. It is terrific. Like, it's spectacular. And it costs $10 for a bottle. So if you guys are into wine, y'all should check that out. That entire series, 19 Crimes, all of the wines in that collection are really, really good and not very expensive. And most of the wine that I like happens to be really expensive, but this one it's like on par with them. It's from Australia instead of Napa Valley, which I think is the reason why the price is so much less. So let's see here. Some more people came in. Adil, good to see you. And also, I guess you guys should know, Bert's not here today. She's out working with clients. We have this event called the Wedding Show. And essentially, she's helping clients work their booth. So this is the reason why she abandoned me and left me here by myself today. So it is what it is. I will let her know that you guys had mentioned her in the comments, and maybe next time she'll plan better and I'm joking. Work takes priority, right? So cool. Let's see. So cheers to all of you. It's 1 p.m. here, so I feel comfortable having a glass of wine. Actually, I feel comfortable having a glass of wine anytime, so it is what it is. Your sound is going wrong, dude. Shit. So it's back. Okay. Angry Rabbit Productions, thanks for stopping by. Steelworks Media, thanks for stopping by. And thank you, Anthony, for letting me know about the audio. So on my meters here, it sounds fine. And in my ears, it sounds fine. So if you guys run into anything else and you guys can let me know, I would appreciate it. So for all of you who don't know me, I'm Carlos, and I'm a creative director at MediaIQ. And I know most of you do know me, so we're good there. I want to also remind you, because this actually helps the channel quite a bit, if you don't mind liking, or if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down, whatever, and subscribing and ringing the bell so that you guys are notified anytime we do these. I would really appreciate it. I'm going to take these off because they're making my head warm. But if sound is cool, just streaming artifacts. Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know there, loud and clear. I appreciate that. So let's get started with the features. And what I did is I created a couple of graphics here so that you all know what it is that we're going to be talking about. And I have Komodo on one side, and I have the R5C on the other side. I also brought one of my Komodos. I'm using the other one to live stream. And I brought the R5, which it's not the R5C, it's the R5. It's the OG R5. I've been shooting with both of those cameras for a while now. And each of those cameras provides a very unique and value point and value proposition to me as a creative director, as an owner operator, as a shooter. So I thought comparing Komodo to the R5C made the most sense because the R5C, let's just get this out of the way here. The R5C is $1,500 cheaper than the Komodo. And I know that for a lot of people, when you're thinking about jumping into the cinema line of cameras of any brand for that matter, budget matters, right? Because you're not just buying into a camera, you're also buying into what lenses that camera is going to support. You're buying into the media that the camera is going to be using. You're buying into the computer that is going to be able to help you in post-production, and so on and so forth. So it's an entire ecosystem that you're buying into. So that extra $1,500 that you save, say if you went with the R5C, could potentially help you elevate where you're going or what your initial startup cost might be when you step into the cinema line. If you already own a cinema camera, both of these cameras, the Komodo and the R5, will complement your work, period. Because each camera, they suit specific type of shots or productions that sometimes make things easier, right? So let's start with the design, and then we'll take a look at some comments and see if we got, anything here to discuss. So the R5C, for the first time, is actually what I would consider to be a true hybrid camera. And what I mean by a true hybrid camera is that little switch on top of the camera, right? Where if you go stills, you get the photo menu, and you don't have to fiddle with the photo menu to find video related things. Or if you're in the wrong mode, like on the R5, if you're in the wrong mode and you're like, well, I know Canon log settings were set here, like, why can't I see them? Well, it's because you're in a different mode. So menu items hide themselves depending on what you're doing. Whereas if you switch to video mode, then you're instantly working in the video menus. So you can find things like shutter angle. You could find things like clear scan, which is something that I'm a big fan of if I'm shooting in a mixed light environment. You can find auto black balance and so on. A lot of the different tools that matter to those of us who are shooting video. So for the first time ever in any camera from any brand, except for Panasonic maybe, and I haven't used Panasonic cameras, so I can't speak to them. So I don't understand their menu because I haven't used them. But other than the Panasonic camera that had the active cooling in it, that was also full frame, the R5C to me truly looks like a hybrid camera. Komodo, on the other hand, it's got a modular design, which really means you can strip it down to get super compact in the vehicle type shot at full 6K quality, or put it on a crane, or put it on an octocopter that is not $1 million, and you can still get some epic shots from the camera because of how small it is. But if you need it to work in a studio environment, something like what I have here, where I have the module, right, that gives me a lot of extra ports, including timecode and such, Genlock, things like that, a larger monitor, and basically I just need to put a battery on here, and I am ready to rock in a studio type build. And obviously everything in between, from handheld to whatever else. So to me, each of these two, based on how they're built and what their design functions are, they suit incredibly well. Like, for example, I'm going to be covering a live event in Vancouver later on this year in May. My original thought was I'm going to bring my Komodos, and just 3 Komodos to cover the event should help me. Komodo has this unique thing where I cannot route external audio outside of or through the SDI, which really means that I would then also need to bring a mixer, and I would also need to bring some way to get high quality audio into the live stream that is going to be taking place. Well, with the R5C, I don't need to worry about that because I can get whatever audio I'm plugging into the camera out via the HDMI, and I'm good to go. So they each have their strengths and their weaknesses. So let's take a quick look at the comments and see if anything has come up that we need to discuss here. There have been a lot of comments, so thank you for that. And it looks like you all are just talking to each other. Let's see. I should probably turn these overlays off so we can read this. Off. There we go. All right, so Max says, Canon has rocked the CF Express, maxed out the data rate is bloated details, or is it just real? I don't have the monitor to see the truth. So the fact is that more data is going to equal a better picture, period. No matter how you slice it, right? If you can get more information into any container, you're going to get the appearance of higher resolution because there's less artifacts and less guessing that the software or the algorithm or the demosaicing has to do. So the answer is bigger data rates, while it costs you more in terms of storage, gives you a visible and noticeable quality increase. So I don't think it's just bloat. I think they did it because of quality. I have the R3 and it matches pretty close to my Komodo, both 6K raw internal. So that's the other piece that I think is really unique and interesting there, Angry Rabbit Productions, about the way that Komodo's raw compression works, and then also the way that Canon has adapted their raw compression to work. It seems like the high quality is equal, so it's a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 compression rate, and then the medium quality is equal, again, between Canon and Red, and the low quality is also then again equal, so it matches. So the data rates are likely very similar, but more importantly, the image quality is then also very similar. And I think that, without, just need to make sure I'm in focus here, without taking anything away from either of the two cameras, I think that ultimately both are able to produce a high quality, high resolution picture, whether it's a Canon or whether it's a Red. And maybe some people, want me to pick sides on which one is better. But truthfully, for me, where I'm at in my career and what it is that I see and how I work, it isn't so much about one being better. It's more about the aesthetics of the image. So for me, as an example, the Komodo image has depth. There's more separation between me and the background, even though the background here is only maybe 15 feet away from me, right? So that I like about Komodo sensor. It's just, there's something about it that gives me that depth. So think of it as film stock, right? Each sensor is a different flavor of an interpretation of the image that you're capturing. With that said, I think both systems produce great quality looking images. This was a question for Cam. I'm guessing Cam responded. I hope he responded. Let's see, would the R5C be a better system if it were video only? And I think if you need video only, then you should get a C70. You shouldn't get the R5C. I think the only reason why you get the R5C is because you want the ability to take high quality, high resolution stills. If you want a video only camera, then I would say go with the DGO sensor camera from Canon, because that is going to be the top of the line sensor that Canon makes today. And if you want just video only, the C70 is going to knock it out of the park. The C300 Mark III is going to knock it out of the park. And if you want to stay with red, well, you said R5C if it was video only. So clearly you're favoring Canon. So that's my opinion. Let's see. I wonder if it's worth the $1,500 savings, or if Komodo is the best. Just save up money and invest, because $1,500 can barely buy an RF cine glass. Okay, so that's actually really interesting, Louis. And you're right. If you're investing in RF lenses, effectively every purchase is like buying a cinema lens. That's how expensive those lenses are. Now, as far as Komodo being able to outperform the R5C, I think in video, Komodo has the ability to outperform the R5C simply because of the way, well, the dynamic range, right? Canon has told us that we get 12 stops of dynamic range on the sensor in the R5C, and we know that we can get more than that on Komodo. So I think from a performance standpoint, Komodo could outperform it, but I think that I think the story is bigger than that. And without sounding like I'm wish-washy, I believe that the two complement each other so well that might be the best solution, instead of trying to figure out which only camera you should buy. And I'm a big believer of having more than one camera of the same type, because it simplifies life. But I'm thinking, like in my studio with my work and the way that we do things here, having 3 Komodos and having 3 R5Cs makes a lot of sense, because it effectively gives me the ability to show up in any type of shooting environment or scenario, whether it be for broadcast, whether it be for national commercial work, or for anything having to do with the internet, right? Social media, whatever. And I can knock out that project effectively with no compromises. So I think that that's the story there. Let's see. Loud and clear, Jonathan. Okay. Oh, so S1H is the camera that I couldn't think of the name. Jonathan Masters. So you have it, love it. That's awesome. Great camera, but the R5C is tempting. I think the R5C is going to be tempting to a lot of us. And, before I go on the features for these different cameras, here's what I'll say. When the R5 was announced, I got myself incredibly hyped about that camera. I was so in love with the thought of shooting 8K internally that I ignored everything else. And where we're at with the R5C announcement at this point is we know what marketing wants us to know, and we maybe don't know everything about the camera, about the camera's limitations. And I'm not saying that there are lots of them. Maybe there aren't any. But after what we all lived through and experienced with the R5, there's a potential for that, right? So once the camera is released and we can get it in our hands, then maybe this conversation becomes more important. For now, it's cool to get hyped up on it, but it's also cool to ground our feet and know that we only know what marketing wants us to know at this point. So with that, let's keep going here. So my mic sounds crashed again. Is anybody else having my mic problems? I don't even show me coming even close to clipping here. And my Apogee software is telling me that everything is fine. If anybody else can let me know, I would appreciate it. Let's see here. High Creative Digital. I feel the RF glass is too sharp for video. I don't think you're the only one. I think that you're right. Canon has chosen, in my opinion, to go with more of a clinical look. So more, that super sharp look, which I'm not opposed to having, because I'd rather have the sharpness. And by the way, if you shoot in RAW, you don't get that extra processing, right? Because then you can apply the sharpening the way that you want it. But I'm not opposed to having the extra resolution or sharpness, because I can then dial it down to taste or to what my project needs in post-production. And I think that is better than not having it and then trying to sort out how to get it and make it look artificial in post. Loud and clear, better weather sealing, unlimited recording, awesome. Autofocus IBIS, which can be disabled. Okay, I'm not following that conversation, so sorry. The R5C is going to be the most clutch hybrid working camera. Cam, I totally agree. For gigs where I have to run and gun like crazy, don't want to lug around a KOMODO kit, the R5C is going to be the way to go. So I feel exactly the way that Cam just described it. I feel like the R5C could potentially help me work faster in fast-moving sets where speed matters. And, sometimes when you're working with talent, for example, you could be spending in excess of $1,000 per hour for them to be there, right? So if you can get all the shots that you possibly need, you could potentially be helping the project save cash by not having to wait on setups or needing to bring 3 different camera setups to the set so that you can move from one type of shot to the next. And I think, Cam's point makes a lot of sense. And that's where I'm thinking and what I'm thinking. Should I sell my R5 and go for the R5C? Angel, I'm just going to say this. If you use your R5 for video, like I have, then the answer for me is simple. Yes. If you do not use the R5 for video, then no, like why? Or if you occasionally use it for video, then I don't know that you need to. But if you use it equally for video and stills, why not? You're going to live in a much happier place when you are in the R5C, and you don't have to deal with overheating. You can get the oversampled 4K right in camera, unlimited, and no 30-minute record limit. Like, it's kind of a no-brainer. Let's see. I would like to know how you would use the R5C in your workflow, Carlos. I mean, you have a Monstro, which is better than 99% of the cameras out there. So yeah, Monstro for me is a studio camera and a commercial environment camera. So if we're renting an Octacrane to cover, say, a specific product shot and a commercial set for a client, Monstro is the one that's on that Octacrane. If we have in-studio sessions with talent, yeah, Monstro is the one that is handling that. I'm working on a project right now. It's called 50 Stories for 50 Years with a company called Dakota Fence here in town. And they have 4 branches across the state. And what we're actually doing is we're going to each of the branches and we're doing interviews in people's physical workspace, which in some cases are offices that are maybe half the size of this office, my home office. And it's their working environment. So you can imagine how cramped that is. The R5C would fit really well in that scenario for me because I could shoot everything in 8K, get all the quality that I need. It's got a full frame. So my lighting that I would need to bring with to get that done becomes a smaller lighting package. And my overall footprint of what it is that I'm shooting becomes that much smaller. So in a scenario like that, in case you can't tell, I'm already thinking ahead, thinking, yeah, if I had the 5RC, I could use it in this project. And that's, I feel like that's a really good compliment from someone like me for a camera like the 5RC. Let's see here. Another note, Komodo doesn't have 16 stops of dynamic range. It's more like 12, very similar to the R5, R5C, maybe half a stop better. So Jonathan, I'm going to disagree with you. I didn't say Komodo had 16 stops. You know, Red says Red cameras have 16 stops. I think Komodo is closer to 14. I don't think it's equal to the R5. I have shot in scenarios where I can, you know, and I have videos on my channel where I've shown how well Komodo handles highlights and highlight roll-off and highlight retention and information in the highlights as well as in the dark areas of the image. And I've shown how the R5 attempts to recover some highlight information, but ultimately has a hard shelf that you can't get around once you reach the sensor's limit. So I don't agree with you. If you have clips where you want to share how you're comparing the two and telling me that they're identical, drop a link. And yeah, let's all check it out. So cool. Link to join. Yep. Sorry, I should have copied that earlier. Copy link. Here we go, loud and clear. Take a quick drink. Let's see. R5C isn't too power hungry if you are working with manual lenses. So that's an interesting statement, Ken, and I suppose, right, because it's not having to do autofocus. And there is no IBIS in the R5C, so then that's not drawing extra sound is bad again. Okay, so let's. There we go. Can you hear me? Oh, I should put my.
Yes, I can. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, good. Hang on, I gotta get your feed off here because I hear you on two screens.
Sound is bad again.
All right, let's see. Okay, I think I'm sorted. Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Boy, there's a lot, a lot of little nuggets. You know, it's funny when I watch these, I cheer and I boo at the screen like I'm watching a sport, right? With all these comments going through. So, a few different things I want to say. So, most recently about the dynamic range thing. Because I have a Komodo, I have a bunch of Sony cameras. I have a Blackmagic camera. I have messed with R5s before. I don't own an R5, and I think you're absolutely spot on as far as, you know, whether the dynamic range on the R5 is greater or not. It really has to do with, like you had said, that highlight knee and how they roll off, and how cameras like Komodo within the IPP2 workflow allow you to soften the highlight roll off and therefore retain more information through windows. And if anybody wants to see this, they can check out some of the real estate videos on my channel with the Komodo. You can still see detail and color through bright windows while still having the exposure for inside. And that's something that, you know, in my experience, what I've seen with the Canon cameras, other than the DGO sensor cameras, they just can't do. So, you know, and the Blackmagic camera is like that too. Blackmagic, I think you even said, Carlos, once you tested only at like 11 stops or something like that at dynamic range, but they have that sorcery type of highlight recovery tool that you can engage in post-production, that I think what it's doing is taking those last couple stops of the super whites down to grayscale. And so it actually will retain a bit more detail. And I don't know how it's doing that. I think it's like some kind of algorithm with whichever color channels aren't clipping. But that's something that, you know, that the R5 doesn't do particularly well. And like you said, it's got that hard shelf right there. And once you exceed that limit in highlights, they're gone. You know, they're gone. They're clippy. It's just nasty white, and that looks like video. You know.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because, like, so much about the image is great until you realize, oh shit, I clipped the highlights. And then that one thing just sticks out like a sore thumb when you're looking at it, and it's like, I can't use that clip anymore. And
Right.
and I think even Phil last week, when Phil popped in and he was talking about the R5C, and he said in his, preliminary shooting, he found them to be very similar. And I made the comment of, when you are on the R5, if you protect the highlights, then you can work your way around the midtones and the shadows to get your exposure where you need it to be, but you have zero options of not paying attention to the highlights. And Komodo, Arri, other cameras give you more flexibility.
Yeah, not only that, but I think Komodo, their metering system with the goalposts and is really nice. Because you can see yourself approaching the point of no return before you get there and back it off. It's not quite such a oh, I've lost control. That's it.
Right. Yeah, it's we were doing a documentary downtown, and you can imagine downtown you get really tall buildings, so you're in like full shadow or open shadow, and then you turn the camera, you pan the camera in one direction or another, and you might hit the sky. When the sky goes nuclear, that shot is ruined. It's just, there
Right.
is no coming back from it. And and I'm not saying Komodo can't clip highlights. It just looks pretty when it does, which is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. It absolutely can clip highlights, but even when it does clip highlights, if you go into the IPP2 workflow and choose the super soft roll off, it doesn't look as bad as most other cameras when they clip highlights. It's still just going to be pure white, and you're gonna lose detail, but it's just something about how it blooms around it, which is really nice. So, what's the other thing? I actually wrote down a couple things that I was cheering and booing for here. Oh, what's funny? Okay, so about the RF glass conversation. So as you know, I've recently been buying RF glass, and I agree. It is often a bit over sharpened. It's just, I mean, the glass is just fantastic. I mean, that's really what it is. It's Canon giving us everything that we would want, and we can choose to dumb it down if we want. But with this conversation and Komodo especially, it's kind of interesting because I think RF glass is going to be better on the R5C than the Komodo for one very important reason, and that's that the R5C is going to have a better autofocusing system. So, really sharp glass is kind of like really resolute sensors in that if your focus is off by a hair, you're going to see it when it's really sharp. Whereas, if it's not as sharp glass or you've got some type of filter engaged over it, you've got a little bit more leniency on critical focus. It's like I said, same thing is true with shutter speeds. Fast shutter speeds with high resolution still sensors. You have a really high resolution sensor. If your shutter speed is just a little bit too low, it looks visibly out of focus. So I've been playing around with it. And the final thing I wanted to say was it's something that I haven't heard mentioned yet in this conversation, and that is client perception, between the R5C and the Komodo. It is a real thing. And, I know your audience is mostly professionals. And when you have client work, okay, you can show up with, let's say, a Sony A1, okay, and let's say you show up with this to shoot video. Now that's a $6,500 camera. That is more expensive than a Komodo, okay, but it doesn't look the same as when you show up with something like that. And people, as goofy as this is, it makes a difference. It matters. When you're charging somebody thousands of dollars for a project, uh, they don't want you to show up with a cell phone. you know
On that note, I which is really interesting, right? Because now with cell phones and cell phones like the iPhone 13 and so on, clients think that maybe they can do it themselves, and maybe they can do it using the cell phone that's in their pocket. And to your point about when we're charging people money, you're right. If your day rate you know, is not $500, and I'm guessing most of us, that's not our day rate. We need to make sure that we create, and this is more like a business conversation than like a what is the camera capable of doing conversation. But we need
Yeah,
to
sorry
create.
I derailed you.
No, that's okay. But it's like we need to create separation with how we show up on set, what tools we use on set, so that the client can't just walk into Best Buy and say, "Yeah, I bought the same camera that you came in, so maybe next time don't charge me the camera rental rate." And I think that that's really, really important. And again, that's not to say that any camera is not capable of doing a good job. I think working on skills matters more than specifically which camera and which lens you're going to start using. I think if you have the skills and you understand the limitations of the tools that you're using, you're going to end up with a better product in the end than if you just expect the camera to do all the work for you. And on that note, I'm just going to say this about the R5C, right? I think that if people rely heavily on autofocus and people rely heavily on image processing in the camera, in other words, you're not really shooting raw, you're wanting to get the Canon colors out of the standard picture profile or the portrait picture profile if you're shooting interviews or whatever, and you need to do quick turnarounds, the camera is going to help you a lot very quickly, and that's a better camera than the Komodo. Whereas the Komodo literally allows you to be the artist. You can say, this is what I want my ratios to be, and this is how I want the image to be interpreted, and this is what I want my saturation to be, my sharpness, my contrast, and so on and so forth. And the benefit of that is you are in control of the image, but you're building an image based on a stock look that the Komodo sensor naturally has. It's not a clinical, super sharp or overly processed. I'm going to use a really horrible example here. And if anybody loves the Blackmagic 12K camera, sorry, I'm about to hurt your feelings. But when
I'm still going to buy you one of those.
when
They're cheap now.
yeah, I mean they're great paperweights, I hear. When they showed, the 12K image and then they punched in to look at the side of that ship in those videos, I was like, I hate this picture. Like, I don't want that type of artificial plasticky looking image, because that's not what my clients pay me for. And if I was trying to do that, whether it be a tractor that I'm shooting or a vehicle or a motorcycle or a piece of jewelry, and I'm creating something that looks artificial, my clients are going to sell less of it. And I think that for me anyway, one of the reasons why I gravitate so heavily towards red cameras is because they allow me to build an image that looks similar to what my eye sees.
Now, if
Not
we could only get them to put a preamp in the damn body.
well, yeah. If you, I guess if you're in the market for a V Raptor, it sounds like those things are going to start shipping. the the little XLR modules. So,
yeah, I need to buy my wife a car first.
yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to wait actually for the XL version because I want full-time, full-size XLRs on my camera.
Yeah, well, I have as you know, I have a Red Dragon X. It's right back there. It's pretty much a paperweight these days. And so I don't know if my speed is spending over 20 grand on a camera anymore. It doesn't pan out unless you already have the work lined up. That it's going to pay itself off.
Yeah, and that's a really good conversation too, right? And I think it applies to the R5C as well as the Komodo. I think that as a solo operator for Komodo, it's a bigger investment, which really means you need maybe more clients. And although $6,000 really for a camera body, it's not a lot of money, right? Like it isn't. Like you said, the A1 costs more.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that because it isn't above $10,000 or above $20,000 that you shouldn't treat it like a piece of gear that you need to recoup your investment in. Because none of us are really, I hope none of us are just camera hoarders or trying to build a collection of cameras just to say that we have it or to flex. So ultimately, like I'm thinking right now, for me, I have the R5. Upgrading to the R5C means I'm going to take a hit probably in some capacity on selling my R5, and then replacing it with the R5C. I'm going to spend more money. But the fact,
Especially if somebody saw the live stream last week.
yeah, in case any of you guys didn't notice, last week I was streaming with the R5 and it overheated. I should clarify this. I think I had, I think I had my capture settings set to 8K RAW, which is the reason why the camera just sitting there without actually recording overheated after about an hour. With that said, replacing the R5C for me, given this project that I mentioned, the 50 interviews for 50 years, basically, even if I buy 4 of them, they're already paid for. And I think
Right.
that that's really, really important. And if I use the Komodo really instead of the R5C, it's a little bit more gear to haul around, like Cam said earlier in the conversation. I'm gonna need to take a little bit more time at each of the locations and so forth, but 100% of that becomes profit. So, weighing the what's better for me, like what's more convenient, is really what it boils down to. And honestly, speed is convenience. And for me, Komodo in post-production is the fastest post-production workflow that I've ever used. But on set, on location, to get that shot, it is not the fastest workflow that I've ever used.
I completely agree. And that's why when I'm out there shooting interiors, my daily driver is the A7S III because it is really fast on site. But then when I have builder jobs, and those are the ones, the builder jobs in a luxury property that I use Komodo on, I can afford to slow down a little bit because I'm charging more, for that work. And ultimately, it's going to be a better product just because it's a better looking image. It just is. But yeah, no, you're right. And the post workflow is so nice with Komodo because of all red cameras. The codec is unbreakable. I mean, it is really hard to break an R3D as long as you exposed somewhere in a 4-stop ballpark or so.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. Um, I'm gonna put a link in here because Cam wants to join in. So just give
Yeah,
me
I'm
one
gonna
quick
I'm gonna
second
go.
here.
My kids probably have something on fire by now. So
I hope not. I hope not.
yeah.
But that's a really good point. So Cam, I just put a link in there. If you can click the link, and then you'll go into the green room, and then we'll bring you in. But 4 stops is where red code raw breaks, right? 4 stops under, 4 stops over. That is where it breaks. Canon cameras break at 3 stops, and that's a fact. And if anybody doesn't believe me, shoot a test yourself, and then let's have this conversation again. And I think that that's important to know because that is true whether it be in the shadows or in the highlights.
Oh, you know what? One more thing before Cam joins,
Okay.
that's important on the Komodo versus the R5C. Komodo is shooting 6K RAW. Um, Nobody's going to shoot 8K, right? So let's just assume that the R5C is a 4K camera. Uh, that is very useful in descaling noise, versus a lot of these other cameras. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Let you discuss it if you want.
Okay. And you're
Peace,
right.
brother.
That is a good point. Thanks, man. Good to see you. All right. We got Cam in the house. So let's see. I'm adding me. There we go. Hey, Cam. Thanks for joining, dude.
What's up, bro?
Good to see you, man.
I don't have a fancy setup for streaming, but
Shit, that's a pretty
man, how do
nice
I
setup.
mute myself?
How you been, man?
Oh, dear. Hey, I'm trying to mute myself because I hear myself repeating.
Oh,
I don't know. I'll just get used to it. Yeah, bro. I'm setting up for a YouTube video right now, actually. But I'm getting the R5C ASAP. Um, Only because the past like 4 gigs that I've been hired for, I'm gonna mute myself while I'm talking. So the past like handful of gigs that I've been hired for, I just left the Komodo at home because it's been a lot of like we're on the road. Like I'm going to Costa Rica in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna take the Komodo, just because I have no idea. There's no pre-planning at all. It's like we show up there and we plan on the day. So the Komodo works great for stuff like that, but the R5, which is like autofocus if we're doing interviews, if I'm having to like run behind someone or anything like that, I can easily slap on the gimbal and I have to bring a bunch of extra stuff with it. So for me, it's going to be an insanely just like super clutch camera.
Yeah, and I personally like the fact that I can shoot in 8K and deliver in 4K because I've been doing that on Monstro. I did that on my Helium before I had Monstro, and no matter who you show it to, they're like, that shit looks really nice. Like it just looks nice.
Yeah, like being able to film even the 4K HQ, which the R5 never overheats on me because I don't shoot in that mode. But I freaking love that mode because the footage just looks insane, and you're able to get like 3 to 4 different camera angles out of it.
Hmm.
And so that's what another thing I'm super excited for. It's like we can whatever format you're shooting in. Say if I have to deliver straight to the client, that's the other issue with like ProRes red raw footage. A lot of times, their internal teams have zero clue on how to grade that.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but yeah, just being able to do that, like just have one camera up. I don't have to worry about overheating. I don't have to worry about file sizes like crazy ProRes off the Komodo. And they're still able to go in and crop in and do multiple formats out of it, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like that's an understated fact, right? Like being able to shoot in 8K really makes whatever camera is capturing in 8K a multi-format camera, like instantly. That is that has been like the one thing I never planned on that has just made a huge difference for me over time.
Yeah. I mean, and also just as like a B cam, a lot of times like I'm working on one bag and I stuff my Komodo and my R5 and just all RF lenses. Matte and focus for me on RF lenses, I know a lot of people complain about because it's focused by wire. But I mean, on the R5, you can set it to where it's focused by distance. So I never had an issue mounting focus on RF lenses. But I'll just use the Komodo as a cam, and then I usually have the R5 on a gimbal. So even with that, like, because I get like 50-50 use out of it for the day. And even with that, to knowing like how the histogram disappears on the R5 once you start recording and you
Hmm.
can't make adjustments on the way. And then when I go to match and post, I do have to do a little bit more work on the R5 to get to match with the Komodo. But now with the raw light, like, because I filmed the raw before, and the file sizes are huge, but you can easily get to match the Komodo a lot closer with like a color space transformer or anything like that.
Yeah, I also so this is something that I discovered a few months ago, and maybe a lot more than a few months ago. But regardless of which, if you shoot in RAW, if you drop the Alexa Log C LUT onto the footage, then getting them to line up is it's like 2 clicks. It's super easy. Um, so yeah, whenever I have worked with mixed cameras, like if I'm shooting on Komodo and on the R5, I use Alexa Log C LUT, and then I make my adjustments from there, and it's just speeded up my workflow so much more without having to do color management in Resolve.
Yeah. And so again, just simply having um, like raw, like accessible raw, not like that, because the raw on the R5 right now is ridiculous. It's
Yeah,
so freaking large. And I have like a terabyte and CF Express B cards, and it's still just too much. And so the raw light, that's what I'm most excited about. And everyone complain about the IBIS. Like for video, IBIS ruins more shots than like if you're doing like locked off photo shots, like that's fine. But I mean, put it on your tummy or something, you're really fine, you know?
I'll I'll say this. I've never cared about IBIS ever. IBIS has not been something that has mattered to me, um, because even when I'm working handheld, like for me, working handheld with Komodo, the global shutter makes my handheld work look pretty, right? On the R5, I couldn't say that because it just doesn't look that good, and I'm not like great at handheld. But any other shot is a shot that was planned, and if it's planned, then I have the proper supports, and I don't need IBIS. And for pictures, honestly, like the only pictures really that we shoot these days are headshots or product shots. And the product shots, they're in a white box, right? They're in a light box. That's where the shot is going to happen. And if it's a portrait of some sort for a client, then they're again locked off on a tripod. So why do I need IBIS? But
Yeah.
so I guess
And
I've never, and I didn't start with photography. So then there's that too.
yeah, I mean, when you're going for the handheld look, IBIS kills that look. And so I did that one video on like how to like tricks for doing handheld, and it's all about the weight, getting multiple control points on the camera. And IBIS just ruins all that. And even for professional photography work, if you're going down to 1/60th of a second, you might hire again because you're giving your chance to get blurred photos. Like that's if when you're getting paid like $20,000 plus for a gig, you don't do that. Like even you could put IBIS down to 1/5 of a second, whatever, and get a sharp shot. But I'm not going to chance that and all that money on
Right.
IBIS.
Yeah.
So I keep it above 1/25th at minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. Good points. Cool. Well, I got Angry Rabbit Productions that wants to jump in, Cam. Anything else you want to say before you jump off? Thank you
No,
for stopping
that's
by,
it.
dude.
Thanks
Appreciate it.
for having me in, bro.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Peace.
dude. Okay, we're bringing you in. Angry Rabbit Productions, how you doing, man? Can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you. Okay, while he's sorting that out, I'm going to just look at my cheat sheet here of what the features were. Here we go. Okay. Hey, James, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, man?
Always good to see you, dude.
Always good to see you too, man. I'm normally I would be in my studio, but I just got done with a real estate sort of passion project with a friend of mine. So I still have some of my gear in the car. So figured I'd just come to the car just sort of keep things quiet away from the family. How you been,
Cool.
man?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Staying healthy. That's kind of these days. If we can stay healthy, we're winning.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I just saw the live, and definitely wanted to hop on. Uh, Give my perspective definitely on the R5C and just the different. I gotta say the R5C is definitely. I think it's going to be a very popular camera for. I think definitely one of the big things it'll probably be good with is wedding. Um, and I know it's between the Komodo and the R5. For me, I think what's going to really my only concern with the R5C is the power consumption. And sort of like just how much power draw it takes. Almost wish they were kind of put it in a larger body because, as Cam just talked about previously, like just having extra weight. If they had extra weight to put in something like a BP battery, but I guess they didn't want to make it more like the C70. I guess that's the case.
Yeah, and I guess that is what it would have been, right? Like if they'd have done that, it would have been a C70 that can also shoot stills.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Which would add, I because I look, I know this is C70. I mean, this is R5C and Komodo, so I won't bring in the C70, but um, there's a lot of reasons why I think the C70 is definitely popular, but I think it's still to be. I think this is an interesting thing now when you got a camera that's a full frame that shoots raw. But I think honestly, that's only. But the raw is only going to be obviously for 8K. I would definitely use it for the 8K because I would use it for like stock footages. I would use it for when I want to have multiple shots that I want to punch in. But I know that's not a lot of people. But you still have that Super 35 mode as well. That sort of gives you an oversample 4K footage.
Well, I thought the 4K was full frame super sampled.
Yeah, I'm talking specifically the raw.
Okay,
Sorry.
got it. Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, I was talking about the raw in general. But it is. I think it's really a very interesting camera. I've talked about it a lot on my channel as well. Um, I think the C70 has, especially with the firmware update that's come with the C70 around the same time, it's going to be it's going to even make that interesting as well. Uh, but you know what? I know my in terms of my company, we're looking at Komodos because a lot of the people we're starting to work with, they're working with Komodos. It's going to be interesting to see if Canon's going to be, people are going to integrate some Canons into, especially like the R5C, into more workflows. But I know my company, at least, we're working with Komodos. I still personally own the C70. I just sold my R5, but I still own my C70. That's my go-to like for personal camera right now. But in terms of like our company, we're looking at Komodos.
Yeah, and I feel like the future, like once the R5C comes out, I'm buying one. You know, I think I said that last week even. And once I put it through its paces and figure out if there's anything that I should be concerned about, which I'm guessing just from the, what has been released, that there isn't anything, it will be paired with a Komodo kit. So even if we roll with two Komodos, we're bringing an R5C for anything that Komodo can't do or Komodo can't do quickly.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think look, if you're a production company, you're used to just building out your camera anyway. Then the power draw, which is really my only main concern, that nullifies that. Basically, you can just and basically you can take the R5C. I personally wish that I could keep. I like personally when it comes to like these hybrid or these sort of DSLR built style cameras like R5, R5C, C70. I kind of like keeping them as minimum to the body itself. And I think the C70 just spoiled me because I literally can just take that camera and just go. Really, just maybe just want the speed booster if I want more of that full frame field of view. But the C70 just comes as is. So, but yeah, I'm like, but if you're gonna rig it out anyway, there's really nothing holding it back. I mean, I know a lot of people were concerned about that dual pixel autofocus 1 versus dual pixel autofocus 2, but I I was corrected by dang uh I'm running it, but basically he talked to me. Basically he looked in the owner's manual. He said the R5 pretty much has the same setup in a weird way, which is not how a lot of people are talking. What Canon was talking about, but in the manual, the R5 has uh version 1 in video versus version 2 in stills. Um,
I'll
I
say
gotta
this
remember.
from practical use, just for me, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's just my bias or perception, but the R5 tracking and eye focus in video is the best tracking that Canon has ever put out.
Agreed. Yeah, no, same thing. I own the R5. Yeah, it was amazing. I still think the C70's autofocus is decent. Is good. It's good, especially if you have a talking head. You may have to make some adjustments when you're doing stuff for like weddings. But either way, I think the R5C is going to, you know, it's going to answer a lot of needs that I think a lot of people had.
Talk to me about weddings and the R5C. Like for you, what would the R5C do for you in a wedding scenario?
For wedding scenarios, for an R5C, I think it would be more so. It would be more so just to be able to be quick, just to be really quick and easy. But that's interesting. It's an interesting situation because, again, I'm going to be comparing it to the C70 because the C70, I because of how the weight is actually kind of balances everything out. Handheld is actually pretty solid. Like I could, especially with the digital IS. I don't need IBIS, so I never cared for IBIS. And I'm glad you and Cam sort of bring it up because I know it's always brought up how, oh my God, IBIS. I'm like, no, nobody that I know that does film really cares about IBIS because we use gimbals and then the IBIS kind of messes it up. So I'm glad Cam brought that up. But I guess for me, the way I would use the R5C would be basically as a secondary, like a B camera. Like for my C70, it would be a B camera for like getting wide shots of the ceremony, that maybe a cutaway to get some B-roll footage, throw it on to throw it on a gimbal for the little bit of time that battery's going to have. Um, but I kind of feel like I could just move a little bit easier with the C70 still than the R5 because of because the battery life is so much longer. Like even if you weren't shooting raw, even if you weren't shooting like raw on the R5 or 60p raw, the battery life is still significantly longer on the C70. It's like 3 hours on the battery that comes with it, and that to me is a much more needed thing. And the fact it has built-in NDs, which saves me another piece of thing to bring. So like built-in NDs in the battery life and just functionalities of the C70, I guess, has spoiled me. But I still think in terms of the R5, I think it's great. I can even pull some stills. Like if I'm shooting video, I want to grab a still to send to the client. That's another thing that the R5 because of that 8K footage.
So let me ask you this: do you get? And we got Angry Rabbit Productions back in the green room, but I want to ask you a couple more questions here. Do you get hired to do stills and video for weddings?
No, I only get hired for weddings. Uh I get hired for video. However, we work with photographers that either is hired out by we like basically subcontract a photographer, or we sort of collaborate and connect with a photography company. We basically just handle video. I would love to meet someone because I know one of the things that was one of the critiques was it's like, oh, that 8 seconds where you're switching from photos to video. I'm like, who's going to switch from photos to video in the middle of a wedding?
I'll say this, and regardless of the environment or the type of situation that someone shows up in, right? If somebody's paying you to be there and you show up with just a single camera, you're asking for trouble, right? Like no one should ever just show up with a camera. Like you need to have more than one. And if someone is being hired, I've never worked a wedding, so I can't speak to that. But if someone is being hired to do both, you need to have more than one body. And I have friends, like Adam. I don't think he's in the chat right now, but Adam does a lot of weddings over the year, and he shows up with 4 cameras. 2 of them are tethered onto him, right, with the straps or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's got one in his hand, and he's got a backup, and
Yeah.
that allows him to go from whatever zoom is on one camera to whichever prime is on the other camera, and so on and so forth. And that's one of the reasons why he's successful.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
so this thought of being in a split-second decision situation where you have to go from one to the other, I've never been in that situation, and I don't personally know of anyone who has been in that situation.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like the only situation I could potentially see that happening is like wildlife. If you do wildlife, both photography and video, where you may see an animal, you're taking the pictures, and then you want to switch to get the video. But that's the only other. But that's the only scenario. But even then, as you point out, you have multiple bodies. But like even us as who do wedding videos, we have multiple cameras, or multiple people doing just on the video team, and then there's a whole bunch of other people on the photography side that capture as well. Even when I see people that are like a more smaller team, where it's like one person's doing photography and one person's doing video, they all still have multiple cameras and multiple bodies. So yeah, I never understood that critique of needing that switching from 8 seconds, that 8 seconds of switching from photos to videos. Like even in a situation where you're in a studio with a model, you can use that 8 seconds to sort of like direct. I'm like, okay, we're going to switch to do some videos now. I want you to sort of do this. So what do you do when you can walk up this way, and then 8 seconds is gone?
Yeah,
So
so I'll say this:
yeah,
when I have been in the studio working with a talent or a model, there are at least 3 cameras rolling, and there's always a second shooter, because not
yeah,
getting the shot that whatever we're being paid for is not an option, right? Like not getting fired by the client is the worst possible thing ever. And as a professional, as someone who is working and getting paid for the stuff that we're doing, the imaging that we're doing, it's our job to do the planning and make sure that we don't miss that shot. So cool, dude. Thanks for jumping in. I got Angry Rabbit
no problem.
ready to come in. So thanks again. All right, Angry Rabbit, we're going to bring you in here. How you doing, man? Good to see you. And I still can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I hope you can hear me.
Yep. You're good.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, a pleasure to speak with you in person. I know we chatted a few times online. So about the R5C, my thoughts on that are something like this. I think that the R5C has a lot of potential, but at the same time, I think that it's a bit of a compromise, and that is that the still size maybe is going to suffer by not having an IBIS. I mean, for me, IBIS is largely a tool for when I'm doing longer exposures, handheld. And the reason why I might be doing that is because I didn't want to lug along extra gear. So I think in that respect, it might be awkward to use as a dedicated still camera. I think the R5 is the better solution. But I understand why they did it, because they got a lot of flack when they released the R5 and it had these overheating problems. I recall myself, I had the same issue and ended up returning the R5 after a bit of testing because it let me down on video. As compared to Komodo, they're two very different animals.
Yeah.
I'd said in the chat that the R3, I think, is closer to Komodo. I think probably as a hybrid might be a better solution because none of the overheating, great battery life, 6K footage. I mean, one of my concerns about 8K is I'm knocking down resolution from 6K. It's too much. I'm using vintage lenses. I'm using cinema glass. For me, resolution and detail, anything beyond 1080p might be excessive for what I do most of the time. And if that's not the case, we wouldn't be seeing all these filters like Black Pro Mist and so forth being sold.
Right.
Because we all want the detail, we all want the resolution until we see it, and we see all these details, and everyone can see every pore and every detail in your skin. And the end result is it's not flattering. You remember when you were a kid? I remember watching television, and all these girls on television, they look perfect. I was like, my God, how is it possible? And then when we got HD and now 4K, I watch shows and it's the same. I guess it's the same kind of beautiful women, but they look like normal people now. I can see all the imperfections.
So I'll say this: the broadcast cameras that people use for, say, news, in the news programming in the industry, they have a setting that is a skin softening setting, and they use it. I don't want to like insult anyone, but they absolutely use it because I've seen some of the people in, you know, national broadcast in face to face, because I've worked around individuals and I see what their image looks like when it's being broadcast, and I know that they're using the skin softening features in the cameras, and they're there because, you know, to your point, they need the programming to happen, and they need to allow these people to feel confident and secure and deliver whatever it is that they're doing, without feeling insecure or feeling like they're under a magnifying glass, even though they kind of are because they're in the media. But that is still true. And I'm a big fan, and I think I said it earlier today, of being able to capture the resolution and then allowing me to massage the image to produce what I want. And I can do that more effectively with Komodo. Komodo gives me that ability to craft my image in a way that is similar to what my eye is seeing, whereas cameras like the Blackmagic 12K completely destroy that and turn everything into plastic that is horrible.
Now, I think Canon does a similar thing. I know with the R3 footage I've been playing with lately, because I shoot everything in RAW. What's the point if you're not gonna? And there is a setting that you can adjust the sharpness, and you can actually adjust it all the way down to none. And also skin detail, you can drop it all the way down. And when I do this, I notice that the footage looks a lot more organic. So I pretty much always do it.
Yeah, so Steelworks Media said he has never used IBIS and he still gets great photos. And he has an excellent catalog of images. If anybody wants to check it out, Steelworks, why don't you drop them your link where they can see them? Yeah, the IBIS argument, I think, at least with this community, the community that watches this channel, I think we've all kind of squashed it. If anybody in the chat thinks that IBIS is something that is needed, I get what you're saying, Angry Rabbit. You want to be able to work with less gear and do long exposures handheld. That makes sense. To me, given that that's such a specific situation, the R5C probably isn't the right camera.
Yeah. And I think I'm pretty comfortable with my choice to go with the R3 for the additional weather sealing, battery life, and the fact that it shoots 6K, which is easier in post than 8K. So I think there's some wins there. But I just wanted to throw out that Canon also makes another excellent hybrid camera, and that's the R3. And I think that's closer in its spirit to what Komodo is.
So the R3 does in fact capture RAW then?
Yes, yes. It captures internal RAW, 6K, 12-bit. It's a hell of a camera.
Yeah, so more options. More options means more of us win.
For sure.
And also, Canon does a really good job at reaching into our pockets.
Oh, well, you know what comes next is the R1. And that's going to reach pretty deep, I think.
Yeah, I feel like the R5C for me, pairing it with Komodo is going to be all that I need. I don't know that I need more than that, because if I need high quality, high resolution stills, I've already jumped into the Fujifilm GFX 100S, and
Great camera.
And that does what I needed to do for stills. And really, what I need is something convenient like the R5C to pair it with Komodo. And I think that, at least for me, that's kind of where I'm at.
For me, my use, one of the biggest weaknesses with Komodo is audio. And the new audio accessory for the new multi-shoe on the Canons, I think is going to be a big, big win.
Yeah, so I agree. So, so let's talk about that for just a second, about the audio and Komodo. So it's true, Komodo requires you to capture audio externally, really. And if you're going to try to feed the camera audio straight in, you need a battery-powered microphone, which every single battery-powered microphone that's in the market, I'm about to piss everybody off here, but they suck. They suck ass. they're horrible. I don't care what anybody says. And I get the whole, it gets by or it's passable. They're not when you compare them to quality professional microphones. So with that out of the way, what Komodo has allowed my production company to do is, before we always had the limitation of how many people we can get on mic at any one time. And my limitation always fell right around 6. I could never have more than 6 people mic'd up and still get audio for any given project because of some of the choices that I made and some of the gear that we have and so on and so forth. But when we switched over to Komodo, what it effectively allowed us to do is invest in the Tentacle Sync E, which gives me unlimited number of audio channels that are all super easy to sync up in post. They're locked with timecode, obviously, and they're all recording in 32-bit float. So now we have 16 channels of audio that we can get at any one time from 1 camera, 2 cameras, 5 cameras, and everything is in sync for us because of that investment. And we would have never made that investment if we hadn't chosen to move towards Komodo. And because when I had my my Helium, I bought the XL module that allowed me to have, phantom power and full-size XLRs into that camera, which is what slowed down this process of buying into a time code system that allowed me to record. So I think it's it's a hidden blessing, at least for us, because again, now if we're working in an environment where we're going to have 7 or 8 speakers, or it's a panel discussion that we're needing to cover, we don't have any issues. Like, we don't have any types of challenges, and it doesn't matter if they're doing it in their own conference room or if we're flying out and meeting them at a location. We are now saving them the AV cost of that location because we can do it now in-house for them. So I think that was, an upside, and why for me the audio piece doesn't bother me so much. For studio work, I would rather have the audio go straight into the camera just for speed sakes. But at this point, there isn't a project that we've shot, at least in the last year, where as a backup audio solution, we didn't use the Tentacle Syncs. It's a safety net that now I can't live without.
Oh, I love it. I've been using timecode now since my GH5, I think it was GH5S that added timecode, and been very much a supporter of that workflow. Have you heard about the Komodo XL? Anything on that?
Komodo XL. So just yesterday, Scott, if you guys don't know who Scott is very active on YouTube as well as on Facebook for Red groups. And Scott had his live stream, and the discussion around Komodo XL came up. And Scott said something that makes a lot of sense, right? Komodo is still a highly sought after camera that is very difficult for a lot of people to get their hands on. So why would Red release something to replace it, or something to go side by side with it? And if you need something better than Komodo, they have Raptor. So do I think that this is the end of Komodo? No. I think that once the demand for Komodo maybe settles down, maybe Red will say, yeah, how do we give it a refresh? But until then, Komodo still gets better with every firmware upgrade. So I'm not sure what that limit is for Komodo. And honestly, the only thing that I could ever ask for from my Komodos today would be the ability to route the audio channels through SDI. If I want to push out channel 3 and 4, I'd like to be able to do that. The rest of it, I'm more than happy with what Komodo has to offer. And it's overkill for just about every type of production.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree with that.
Cool. Well, let's okay, I'm gonna say goodbye to you, Angry Rabbit, for now. I'm gonna try to jump back in. Thanks for stopping by again. And I'm just gonna pull these up and let's try to do a rapid fire. We've been at this for a bit. We still got a lot of people here listening. So we talked about the design. We talked about the differences in the sensor, right? So the R5 has full frame. That instantly gives you more stops of light. I can tell you from personal use and from the way that I use my Komodo, I use the focal reducer by Canon, which effectively makes my Komodo have a full frame field of view and also means I get that extra stop of light. So there really isn't a significant difference. Rolling shutter on the R5 compared to global shutter on Komodo. I personally like the aesthetics of global shutter. Rolling shutter is fine on the R5, but I don't shoot fast track moving objects, right? Like I'm not inside of a helicopter who is tracking a race car. That's not the projects that I shoot. The audio solutions on the R5C are exactly the same type of solution that you're going to need on the Komodo until that smart hot shoe adapter that we were previously talking about comes out. Once that comes out, then effectively you got full-size phantom power XLR into the Canon R5C. That will be a benefit to a lot of solo shooters and anyone who hasn't already invested in some other multi-audio solution, like multi-channel audio solution, ISO recording solution for their productions. They're both RF mounts, which really means you can adapt any lens that you want to it effectively, right? Being able to capture 8K DCI internally on the R5C, that is a plus. And being able to do it at 60 frames per second, although you do have to add extra power to it, that makes a difference. And you guys have heard me say before that I love being able to go from or capture in 8K and deliver in 4K. So that is a plus. I do the same thing with Komodo. I capture in 6K and I deliver in 4K. That oversampling makes the images look terrific. I feel like these two cameras effectively, if I haven't said it enough already, complement each other incredibly well for someone like me. When it comes to high frame rates, Komodo crops into the sensor. Up until this point, when I've needed high frame rates, and you guys have heard me say this again on this channel before, I've rented a high frame rate camera if that's what I was doing. And I don't shoot 120 frames per second with any kind of regularity. So I'm not a use case for that feature. The fact that the R5C can do it, I'm sure a lot of people are going to really like it. And I think I messed this up. I don't know if 1080 is actually able to capture at 240 frames per second. So that might be a typo on my part. Mr. B, yes, you can see some of my full projects. I share them on social media on a regular basis. So if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, the likelihood of you seeing my projects in my feed will be great. I don't do it on Twitter that much. So we talked about autofocus, right? If you need and rely on autofocus, the R5C is not going to be a bad camera for you. The autofocus on Komodo, you guys have seen it work because I've been using autofocus this entire live stream and it works. I've been moving back and forth and it keeps me in focus. So then there's that. The fact that Canon has told us the R5C has 12 stops of dynamic range means you need to be aware of that when you are setting up your shot and you need to protect your highlights. Komodo is way more forgiving. We've talked about that quite a bit. Komodo has the ability to capture in ProRes internally. Not something I do, but if you need to hand your footage over to a client, that's not a bad option. If you need stills, the R5C can help you out. The EVF on the R5C, I think, is also a good point, something that is nice to have. There are times where that EVF serves as another touch point to keep the camera steady. And again, I think that that's a good option. I love the fact that on the Komodo, I can hot swap batteries without taking a hit. So that to me is a big, big feature, right? If I know that the R5C is only going to allow me to record for an hour, can you plan the shots? The answer is, of course you can. But on Komodo, I can hot swap indefinitely. What I don't know, and I'm not sure if anybody out there does know this or doesn't, but you know how the R5C requires external power to be able to capture in RAW at 8K 60 frames per second? Can that external power be used to hot swap batteries in the body of the R5C? I don't know what that answer is. If anybody does know that answer, I think that would be of value. The R5C has the ability to do proxy recordings. On Komodo, you don't. We roll with multiple cameras, and that's either a good thing or not a good thing. And yes, Komodo is a badass camera for a lot of things. And both cameras can take in timecode. On the Canon, it's got a little built-in little timecode BNC connector that you can use. And on Komodo, you can choose to do timecode via splitter cable into the audio port or use the expander module or any one of the expander modules that offer it, like the one from Mutiny, which I'll be talking more about that later, to get your timecode in and out. So is there a clear winner? And the answer is the only winner really, for me anyway, is us, right? Being able to have both of these tools at incredibly attainable rates is what makes it a winner for us. And let me look at the comments here and see if we got any other comments that we got to go through. Okay, so let's see. I don't know how far back I'm going to go here. The R1 have a damn fan on board, or we'll need to wait for the R1C. I'm not sure what that was about. That looks like a recipe for disaster. It was fun. Okay. Think at that point you should just buy a cinema camera. If somebody is working in video, like if you make the majority of your money in video, you should absolutely buy a cinema camera. There's no reason why, if you're making your money with video, you should not own a cinema camera. Like whenever they come out with the update to the C500 Mark II, I feel like the C500 Mark II is not going to get an update. I feel like that's the end of life for the C500 series. I think they're going to come up with something like a C600 maybe, and it's going to be RF mount. I feel like they don't have an option. They need to do something. They need to release a camera with an RF mount in the cinema line that is not the R5C. You know, that has all of the other features that the rest of the cinema line has, like the built-in NDs, which a lot of us have liked over the years. Let's see. Can you tell us your setup on the R5C? How will you implement it with Komodo setup? Yeah, after I test it, I certainly will be able to talk more about that. Right now, I'm just thinking, as I mentioned, you know, that 50 interviews for 50 years. I think on that project, that camera will do really well. So we'll see about that. So Mr. B, I think I told you, social media is the best place for you to find samples of my work. And let's see. Komodo's a tough camera for sure. Would love to have built-in NDs, but it's still my favorite camera to date. So I'll say this about built-in NDs, and I think Phil said this last week too. I personally like filtration in front of the lens rather than in the body. And the reason why is because filtration in front of the lens literally allows me to make exposure decisions in half-stop increments rather than whatever the presets are from the camera manufacturer. So, I guess for what it's worth, that's why I own a set of NDs, and I'm happy. And I've used those NDs even on cameras like the C500 Mark II. It just made more sense for me. Let's see here. I heard from some that the battery needs to be in the camera. Okay, so the external power requires that the battery be in the camera in order for it to actually power the camera. Good to know. USB-C power is just supplemental power. Got it. So not enough to actually run the camera. Thanks for that, still works. And I edit projects heard the same thing, so it must be true. Let's see what Jonathan says. If you use the USB-C with a high quality power delivery battery pack, you can run the camera almost indefinitely. So are you saying, Jonathan, that with enough current coming out of the battery bank, it is then also trickle charging the battery, like the internal battery? And can you run the camera without the battery in the body? I don't know. We'll find out. What was my birthday wish? Louis, I didn't, I'm getting old, so I don't really have birthday wishes. Like, my birthday wish was really to hang out with all of you, and that's what I got to do. When Bert said, what do you want to do for your birthday? I said, I want to live stream and hang out with people. And that's what we did. I'm going to talk about productivity for just a moment. So this is something that I personally do, right? I bust my butt during my production work week. And the goal or the reward for me of busting my butt during my production work week is to be able to do things that are more than just for my clients, that are more like for me. And hanging out with you guys is one of those little rewards that I give myself when I met my goals for the production week. So I don't know, for what it's worth, I'm goal oriented, and it helps with my ADHD because it keeps me focused and keeps everything moving forward. Let's see here. Some people are missing that the R5C also can record RAW in multiple resolutions. So yeah, being able to record at different compression rates so you can get more on a card, I think that's really nice that Canon has decided to implement that and go in that direction. And I think you're right, Ken, for the win. That's a feature that is an extra and a nice to have. Jonathan, the rumor suggests 8K DGO version with RF mount of the C300 and C500 rumor names are C500S and C300S. A DGO sensor camera with an RF mount that is full frame, it's going to be like, that would be Canon's flex. Like, if Canon is able to pull that off and give us, 6K in the C300 version, the Super 35, and 8K in the full frame version, that would be Canon flexing. Will Canon do it? Who knows? Komodo RF mount. Cool. Learn something new every day. Thanks, Carlos, for your insight on the Cine cameras. Thanks for the compliment, Comp Channel. Can you use the Anton Bauer tilted-based batteries to power the R5C? They have D-tap in the Anton Bauer Titan base battery, plate screws bottom. So yes, last week Phil showed us that if you choose to use a dummy battery in the R5C, there's a little plastic or rubber thing that you can pull up to allow the cable to come out, so you can use an external battery, so you can D-tap power the camera. So I believe the answer is yes. And I think Steelworks is agreeing. Jonathan, the internal battery will barely get used if you have battery pack with USB powered. Okay. Lewis agrees with the internal ND thing. Awesome. Yes, it will charge the battery if you have the right type of LP6 battery. That's actually also really good to know. So in case you need to untether, you'll have, a full battery. That's kind of cool. I'm excited to learn. I'm excited now. I need to revisit your ND filter video. Thanks, Lewis. Early tests suggest 7 hours of recording with the internal battery plus battery bank. If you have multiple battery banks, you could record for a long time, but you also need to have enough cards. That's actually a really good point. And we'll see where the capacity on those cards, maxes out. I believe Phil let us know last week that the highest capacity card that we can expect is going to be 4 terabytes. I'm not sure that I would, 1 terabyte cards are the right sweet spot for me. And those are the cards that I use currently. Let's see. I agree, Carlos. Work hard, then talk shop. Cool. No, I mean 8K, 5.9K, and 2.9K. Oh, got it. So you can capture RAW in all those different resolutions. Cool. Thanks for pointing that out, Ken. Appreciate it. What type of content do you find clients needing the most of these days? Product. For me, product work is one of the things that keeps us busier. The resolutions, so Ken for the win, the different resolution captures that you mentioned, James is saying that crops into the sensor. That's actually really good information to know. Well, Louis, thank you. Your compliments are always over the top. I appreciate it. I'd buy that in a second. A pair of them actually. Yeah, DGL sensor, full frame, 8K, with an RF mount cinema camera. That would make for a very interesting debate for me. Let's see. C500S, yes, there's also supposedly a new C700. I've heard about that new C700. I have no idea what the specs are. Better than the DGO sensor is, the DGO sensor on the C70, because that's the only DGO sensor that I've ever used, that sensor is special. And if they can do that in full frame, it's going to be really special. Let's see. Dummy battery, that's pretty smart. Honestly, it is. Still works. 8K full frame, 5.9K Super 35, 2.9K Super 16. So Super 16 is about 2K, which is cool. Good to know. And let's see. King Crux Gaming. Carlos, you have used Aries or Sony Venice in higher productions. If so, how do you like the workflow compared to Reds? So I have never used the Sony Venice. I have used Arri cameras, Alexa, the Alexa Mini, and the Alexa LF. And when I've used the Arri cameras, and this is something that you all should know, if you're capturing in RAW on an Alexa, the workflow sucks. It's horrible. So any project where they didn't ask me for RAW, and I had to use an Arri camera, I captured in ProRes. And no one can say that about Red Code RAW. Red Code RAW is supported across all the NLEs. It is well documented. It is easy to work with. It's easy on computers, regardless of what the resolution is. And that's something that makes the Red workflow so special. On top of the look, right? What the sensors are able to provide. So that's, I think that's what I'll say about that. 6K RAW Super 35 crop is a Komodo, but with an option to move to a native 8K full frame is ideal if you need that flexibility. So I'll say this. Every project that I've shot on Komodo over the past 16 months, I've used the focal reducer that allows me to work as if I'm in a full frame field of view. And I've not once missed full frame out of any other camera that I've ever used. My Komodo easily outperforms my C500 Mark II, which I don't own anymore. I got rid of it because of what I just said. So Komodo might be a sleeper camera for a lot of people, but Komodo wasn't designed to be an A-cam, and a lot of us are using it as an A-cam. And I think that says a lot about this little tiny camera and its capabilities. And I feel like the R5C is going to be in that same category where for what it offers, it's going to be a very much a no-brainer. You should pick one up. So that's actually a really good point. And we're streaming today in 2-to-1 ratio because Komodo, the Super 35 sensor, is way wider than what you get out of other Super 35 frames or cameras. That's absolutely true. What do you not like about the Canon RF EF speed booster on Komodo? What lenses don't work good with this adapter? Can you mount Cine lenses on it and get great results? And the answer is, I like everything about it. There isn't, okay, so again, I don't want to offend anyone, right? But I was critical of the C70 when Canon didn't account for the exposure differences and the math in the way that the menus or the overlays displayed information when you added the RF adapter to the C70. And then also what that meant for the witness marks on their lenses. We don't have any of that problem on Komodo. Komodo accounts for what the lens is actually seeing. And that's one thing that I really like. Can I mount cinema lenses on Komodo? And the answer is yes. And they take zero quality loss. And it doesn't matter if I'm working with Canon CNE lenses, which happens to be the lenses that I own, or the lenses that I rent, which are Tokino Vista Primes. They take zero resolution quality hit when I'm using the Canon focal reducer. So hopefully that answers the question. Boot up time is huge for the R5, R3. I'm not a professional shoot. I can't shut off my red, but Canons, I can instantly turn on and off and get a shot. Okay, so I don't even know what to say about that. All I'll say is that the boot up time on Komodo doesn't bother me at all. The boot up time on the C500 Mark II was only slightly faster than Komodo. And if you're working with a cinema camera and you're in a new environment, so for example, this camera that we're using now as my talking head, if I was going to use it outside, I need to power it up, let it come up to temperature, and then do a black shade, right? And that's true for a Canon camera, and that's also going to be true for the Canon R5C, which, by the way, being able to map that black point on the 5RC is going to instantly make the R5C a much better video camera than the R5 will ever be. So in a cine environment, you have to black shade for whatever scenario you're going to be shooting in. So this concept of I'm just standing here with my camera turned off and then something is about to happen and I turn it on so I can get the shot. In a cine scenario, that's not real. It doesn't work that way. At least it hasn't throughout my career. And if anybody in the chat, that is in fact the way that it works for you and you want to chime in, feel free. Let's see. So again, thank you for the compliment, Lewis. Oh, by the way, can said focal reducer will work with the R5C if shot in Super 35 crop mode? No idea. My guess is it'll vignette the sensor, but I have no idea. I don't know. That's a good question. Oh, you're saying Canon said it will. So that's an interesting thought. Would you need to? I don't know. Computer power of Red Raw. Could you please expand? Sure. So if you are using a laptop that was built in the last 2 or 3 years, you will not have any problems with Red Code Raw. If you're using a desktop that was built in the last 2 or 3 years, you will not have problems with Red Code Raw. If you take 8K out of the Canon R5 or 6K out of the C500 Mark II, and you're working with the same type of computer, your render speeds will likely drop to about 12 frames per second on a laptop, maybe even 8 frames per second on a laptop, and 12 frames per second on a desktop. In my desktop, I use a Mac Pro. My Mac Pro, the way that it's built out, costs $25,000, and it still only renders 6K RAW out of the out of the C500 Mark II at about 12 or 13 frames per second when I'm exporting. So Red Code RAW is just easier to work with. Can you do a quick update 6K Komodo review after using it? Yeah, there's a lot of Komodo content actually coming. So yes, there will be more Komodo content. How do you think the Komodo sensor compares to the old DSMC-1 Dragon, aside from rolling shutter? I think that the Komodo sensor and the Komodo image is better than the old. Better? Is better the right word? Okay, when you're bumping up the ISO, or you're working with limited lighting and there are lots of dark areas and you're bumping up the ISO to try to get your exposure the way that you want it in camera, the old red sensors would go green way faster. Komodo doesn't do that as fast. So I don't know how else to explain it. I'm happy with what I get out of Komodo with low light. I have a video on my channel that you guys can check out where I said Komodo's a low light beast because like the way that I exposed in that shot, my exposure was correct. The blacks weren't crushed. There was no noise and it just looked terrific. So I don't know. It's, I can get more out of Komodo than I could out of older red cameras, I guess is what I'll say for now. Brian, actually, Brian's the perfect person to talk about this because he has a Dragon X. They're pretty close. Komodo is better in low light. Yep, that's kind of what I said. Less green shift, that's kind of what I said too. So yeah, good. I'm glad we all agree. Let's see. I forgot to ask about the boot up time. I guess it only matters for running gun, shooting versus studio. Yeah, I don't have an issue with how quickly it boots up or it doesn't boot up. I don't have a battery here, otherwise I would boot this up so you guys can see it, but it's pretty quick. Let's see. I edit. I usually burn through one battery just letting my red warm up and calibrate. So that's true, especially DSMC1 cameras or DSMC2 cameras even. Depending on the battery size that you're using, it could happen because, and here's the other thing, right? Like when you're calibrating, when you're black shading your camera, you don't have to calibrate for every single frame rate and every single whatever. Just calibrate for what you need for that project, and it'll go a lot faster. And you should probably avoid doing auto calibrations. You should calibrate manually to whatever you're shooting. And then you don't have to worry about waiting 45 minutes for the calibration to finish. Just my thought. Okay, still works. I'm lost. I'm not following. Thank you, Carla. Lewis. Turning Lake, Komodo, or R5C. For me, they're both going to be working in tandem with each other. As long as the R5C truly doesn't have a limitation when it comes to capturing motion, it will complement my Komodo. That's my summary. I think that what it has to offer is a complement to any other camera. Do I think that the R5C is an A cam? No. Do I think that it can complement any other Canon camera, including the R5? Yes. The C300 Mark II? Yes. The C70? Absolutely. Red cameras? Absolutely. That's my take. On the point of post-production, I like how you know what to expect from R3D files, but with Canon files, it will probably be a pain to work with. And the fact is that Canon RAW being so much newer, the NLEs are not going to be ready for it. Just like they still are evolving, they're not going to be ready for it. Also, based on past releases, I get a hunch that the R5C will have some compromises that we aren't aware of yet. So that's kind of what I'm saying too. Hey, sweetheart. We're still live streaming. Are you on your way home? Okay, cool. I love you. Bye. So that was Bert. She just finished with her clients. She's on her way home. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like we know everything about the R5 that marketing wants us to know at this point. We don't know what marketing doesn't want us to know. And that's what I'm going to try to find out when I get my hands on the R5C. And of course, I'll share it with all of you because I think that that's really important. Oh, I get it. Okay, now I understand what you were saying still works. Cool. We've been at this for 2 hours. Wow. You guys are rock stars for hanging out with me. Let's see if there are any more comments here. Use the clean sensor function on the R5, R3 actually remaps any hot pixels to the sensor issues that may come up and similar to black shading. I think that that's true for stills. I'm not sure that that's true for motion. So there is a reason why they are two different things. So just keep that in mind. And there's also a reason why even if you black shaded or black calibrated on the R5C, when you're in video mode and you switch to stills mode, you still get the sensor cleaning. So they are in fact two different processes for two different things. Mr. B wants to know if my wife shoots too. She does. She's stills mostly. Yeah, she does. And she's a much better, I don't want to say she's a better director than me, but yeah, there are lots of things that between the two of us, we complement each other, right? There are situations where I'm a better DP, but she's a better project director, or she's a better producer than I am. I'm way more technical. She's way more people. And without the combination of both, I wouldn't have the clients that I have. So I think that that's really important. So cool. Louis, take care, dude. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. I have not tried any Canon cameras, and honestly, the reason why is because the majority of what we do in my studio is motion. And Nikon or Nikon or whatever we want to call it, they've never ever been a motion camera that was on my radar ever. So I have never even considered a Nikon. Thanks for sharing your time with us, man. Familia, why we work hard. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Family is what matters. Cinema camera needs light. Some people feel the aperture 300 is not enough light for the projects, so they order the 600. What's your take on this? Okay, so the super short answer is that the aperture 300D is a good light if you can control all the light in your studio. In other words, if you're working in a studio that doesn't have windows, and if they do have windows, that you can black them out, the 300D by aperture, a couple of them, 3 of them, an array of them, is going to be more than you need to get proper exposure on whatever you're shooting. If you work in a mixed light environment, the 300D is not enough. You need the 600D. We roll with 4 of them, 600Ds. When the 1200Ds drop, we're going to be picking up 2 of them. The 600 is a better light in every possible way. And what you need to know about aperture lights is that they work best when they're at full power. And if you need to reduce that full power, using diffusion in front of that full power blast is where you're going to get the optimal results from aperture lights. The dimmer's okay, but if you begin to work with fast frame rates, you may begin to see artifacts. And I'm not talking about just flicker. I'm talking about artifacts that will ruin your shot. So hopefully that answered that question. Cool. Anybody in the chat going to pick up the Canon R5C? I'm kind of curious. Just want to know. And if you do, we should all compare notes. Like we should all tackle something different in the camera and then have like a powwow live stream type of thing where we say, okay, hey, I was messing around with high frame rates. I was messing around with the different crop factors in RAW or whatever the thing was, and then share our results so that no one person has to try to understand it all at once and we can all benefit, right? That's what I call sharing content information so we can all level up together, which is the reason why we have this channel. What do you guys think about that? Cool. I'm glad Ken's in for that. Steelworks already pre-ordered. That's awesome. Paul, sweet. Heck yeah. Cool. You pre-ordered 2 of them. That's brave. Carla did not. Yeah. Cam, of course, he already told us he put his his order in, which is really cool. So cool. That's all I got for today, guys. I mean, I didn't talk about anything controversial today. That's good. So hopefully we didn't piss anybody off. I only have 1 thumbs down on the stream, which is also very different. I normally have right away 3, and then it varies from there. So I had a lot of fun hanging out with you guys. Please, don't forget, if you enjoy these live streams, make sure you let me know. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And we'll catch up with you guys next Sunday, same time. And we'll find something else to talk about. I'll make sure that I post at least 1 day in advance, whatever the topic is. But, per usual, we're going to go with whatever you all want to talk about because that's what's most important. So have a good weekend. Take care, and I'll catch up with you guys next week. See ya.